"You're worthless trash, and my son deserves better than you," Vincent declared, his voice carrying across the entire dining room like a slap. I sat frozen at the mahogany table, my fork halfway to my mouth, as 23 family members turned to stare at me in stunned silence. The chandelier above cast harsh shadows across Vincent's weathered face, making his contempt look even more severe. "You're absolutely right, sir," I replied quietly, setting down my fork with deliberate care. My voice didn't shake, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my untouched plate of roast beef, and stood gracefully. "Excuse me?" The silence stretched like a taut wire as I collected my purse from the side table. Vincent's wife, Patricia, looked mortified. My husband, Isaac's face had gone pale, and his sisters stared at their plates as if studying the china pattern. Even the youngest cousin had stopped chattering, sensing the toxic atmosphere that had suddenly poisoned what should have been a celebration of Vincent's 65th birthday. "Ruth, wait!" Isaac called out, but I was already walking toward the front door of the imposing Victorian house that Vincent had bought 15 years ago. The same house I had secretly helped finance through my investment company, though he had no idea that the anonymous investor who had backed his real estate ventures was sitting right at his dinner table. As I stepped into the cool October evening in Portland, Oregon, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found my attorney's number. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vincent had spent the entire evening bragging about his latest development project, the $15 million mixed-use complex that would break ground next Monday. He had no clue that his worthless trash daughter-in-law was the primary investor funding his dreams. "Hello, Patricia," I said when my lawyer answered. "It's Ruth. I need you to draft withdrawal notices for the Morrison Development Project. All funding, all partnerships, everything. I want them sent first thing tomorrow morning." I paused, watching through the dining room window as Vincent gestured wildly, probably explaining to everyone why I had deserved his public humiliation. "Are you sure about this, Ruth? That's a substantial investment to pull out," Patricia warned. I smiled grimly as I climbed into my Tesla. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Vincent Morrison just called me worthless trash in front of his entire family. Time to show him exactly what this trash is worth. The satisfaction that coursed through me felt dangerous and intoxicating. Tomorrow would be very interesting indeed. My name is Ruth Peterson, and I'm 32 years old. 3 years ago, I married Isaac Morrison, thinking I was joining a loving family. Instead, I discovered that Vincent Morrison, my father-in-law and the head of Morrison Development, was one of the most arrogant men I'd ever encountered. He owned several commercial properties throughout Portland and considered himself a real estate mogul, though his recent projects had been struggling until an anonymous investor had started backing him 18 months ago. What Vincent didn't know was that his anonymous savior was Crystalia Holdings, the investment firm I had built from the ground up after graduating from business school. I specialized in strategic commercial real estate investments, and my company managed over $50 million in assets. When Isaac and I started dating, I kept my business life completely separate from our relationship. Isaac knew I worked in finance, but he assumed I was just another analyst at some corporate firm. The irony was delicious. Vincent constantly lectured me about finding real work and contributing something meaningful to society. He had no idea that his daughter-in-law's company had been quietly purchasing distressed properties throughout the Pacific Northwest, renovating them, and selling them for substantial profits. More importantly, he had no clue that when his own development company had been hemorrhaging money 2 years ago, Crystalia Holdings had stepped in as an anonymous investor to keep him afloat. Vincent's current obsession was the Crown Plaza development, a mixed-use project featuring luxury condominiums, retail spaces, and office buildings in downtown Portland. The project required significant capital, complex permits, and partnerships with multiple contractors and city officials. For the past year, he had been bragging to anyone who would listen about how he had secured this mysterious investor who believed in his vision. That mysterious investor was me. Through my company, I had provided $2.3 million in funding, secured the necessary permits through my connections in city planning, and arranged partnerships with 3 major construction firms who regularly worked with Crystalia Holdings. Vincent thought his charm and business acumen had attracted this investor. In reality, I had been quietly studying his projects, seeing their potential, and deciding that backing him would be profitable for my portfolio. Isaac had been kept completely in the dark about my involvement in his father's business. I knew that Vincent would never accept help from his daughter-in-law, especially not from someone he considered beneath his family's social standing. So I maintained the facade of being just another housewife, while secretly managing millions of dollars in investments from my home office. The arrangement had worked perfectly until tonight. Vincent's latest project was scheduled to break ground on Monday, and he had invited the entire family to celebrate his success. He had even prepared a speech thanking his mysterious investor, never dreaming that she was sitting right across from him, enduring his casual insults and condescending remarks about women who didn't understand business. Now, as I drove home through Portland's quiet streets, I felt a savage satisfaction building in my chest. Vincent was about to learn a very expensive lesson about treating people with respect. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Oregon weather that matched my mood perfectly. I sat in my home office by 7 a.m., coffee in hand, reviewing the financial documents that would destroy Vincent's world. Patricia had worked quickly. The withdrawal notices were drafted and ready to send. All I needed to do was give her the final authorization. My phone buzzed with a text from Isaac. "I'm so sorry about last night. Dad was completely out of line. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Isaac was a good man, caught between loyalty to his family and love for his wife. He genuinely didn't know about my business dealings with his father, and I had planned to keep it that way indefinitely. But Vincent's cruelty had changed everything. Some lines once crossed couldn't be uncrossed. "I'm fine," I typed back. "At work early. Talk tonight." Work. If Isaac only knew that my work was about to obliterate his father's real estate empire. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Morrison development file. The numbers were staggering. Vincent's company was leveraged to the hilt on the Crown Plaza project. Without Crystalia's backing, he wouldn't just lose this development. He'd face bankruptcy. All of his other properties were tied up as collateral for loans that assumed the Crown Plaza project would provide the revenue to pay them back. I thought about Vincent's face last night, the way he had looked at me with such contempt when he called me worthless trash. The way the entire family had watched in uncomfortable silence as he humiliated me publicly. The way he had spent months bragging about his business acumen while secretly depending on my money to fund his dreams. At 9:30, I called Patricia. "Send the notices," I said simply. "All of them?" "Every single one. I want Vincent Morrison to receive 3 messages simultaneously at exactly 10 a.m. First, his lawyer should get the investment withdrawal notice. Second, I want Isaac to receive a text explaining that I'm the investor his father's been praising for months. Third, Vincent gets a text from me that simply says, 'Don't mess with trash.' Ruth, this will destroy his business completely. Are you certain about this?" I looked out my office window at the city skyline, thinking about all the late nights I had spent analyzing Vincent's projects, the careful research I had done to ensure my investments would benefit both his company and my portfolio, the respect I had never received despite literally keeping his business solvent. "Patricia, Vincent Morrison spent last night explaining to his entire family why his son deserved better than me. I think it's time he learned exactly what he's losing." I paused, feeling the weight of the decision settle around me like armor. Send the messages at exactly 10 a.m. Let's see how valuable trash really is. At 10 a.m. precisely, I sat in my office chair, watching the clock on my computer screen tick over to the appointed hour. My phone was silent, but I knew that across town, Vincent's world was beginning to implode. I imagined him in his office, probably reviewing construction schedules and congratulating himself on his business genius, completely unaware that 3 devastating messages were landing in various inboxes at that exact moment. My own phone remained quiet for exactly 7 minutes. Then Isaac called. "Ruth." His voice was breathless, almost frantic. "I just got the most insane text message. It says you're the anonymous investor Dad's been working with. That can't be right. That's impossible." I leaned back in my leather chair, feeling remarkably calm. "Why is it impossible, Isaac?" "Because that investor put over $2 million into Dad's projects. You work for some finance company. You can't possibly have that kind of money." He paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. "Ruth, please tell me this is some kind of mistake." "It's not a mistake." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "Isaac, I own Crystalia Holdings. I've been running my own investment company for 5 years. Your father's development projects have been part of my portfolio for the past 18 months. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Isaac whispered, "You've been supporting Dad's business this whole time?" "Financially, yes. I saw the potential in his projects and decided they were good investments. Your father never knew because I kept my involvement anonymous through my company. I thought it would be easier that way." Jesus Christ, Ruth. Dad spent all of last night bragging about his mysterious investor. He kept saying this person had vision and understood quality development. Isaac's voice cracked slightly. "He was talking about you. The whole time he was praising you without knowing it." I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the Portland skyline. That's the irony, isn't it? Vincent spent months telling everyone how brilliant and visionary his investor was, while simultaneously treating his investor's wife like garbage at family dinners. "Ruth, what did you do? That text mentioned withdrawal notices." My phone buzzed with another call. Vincent's name appeared on the screen. "Isaac, your father is calling me. I think he's just figured out what happened." "Don't answer it. Please, let's talk about this first." But I was already declining Vincent's call and opening my laptop to check my email. Sure enough, there was a frantic message from Vincent's lawyer, followed by 2 more from Vincent himself, each more desperate than the last. "Isaac, your father is about to learn a very expensive lesson about respect. The Crown Plaza project is dead. Without my funding, he can't make his loan payments. His other properties are going to be foreclosed on within 60 days. I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. The trash he humiliated last night was the only thing keeping his business empire from collapsing. "Ruth, he's my father. Can't I what? Continue to financially support a man who called me worthless trash in front of your entire family? Continue to let him take credit for success that was built on my money while he treats me like I'm beneath his notice?" My voice grew harder. "Isaac, I love you, but I will not be insulted and degraded by someone who is literally living off my investments." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Vincent. "We need to talk immediately. There's been a misunderstanding." I showed Isaac the message during our video call. "There's no misunderstanding, Isaac. Your father showed me exactly what he thinks of me. Now I'm showing him exactly what I think of him." 20 minutes later, my office door burst open without a knock. Vincent stood there, his face flushed, and his normally perfect silver hair disheveled. Behind him, looking mortified, stood Isaac. "I tried to stop him," Isaac said weakly. Vincent stormed to my desk, his eyes wild with panic and rage. "This is impossible. You can't be Crystalia Holdings. That's a major investment firm." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please sit down, Vincent. Or would you prefer I call you Mr. Morrison, since we're apparently conducting business now?" He remained standing, his hands gripping the back of the chair until his knuckles turned white. "Ruth, there has to be some explanation. You're a housewife. You don't have millions of dollars." I opened my laptop and turned it toward him, showing the Crystalia Holdings website with my photo and biography prominently displayed. "Vincent, meet Ruth Peterson, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Crystalia Holdings. I've been managing investment portfolios worth over $50 million since I graduated from Wharton Business School with my MBA in corporate finance." His face went through several different shades of pale as he stared at the screen. This can't be real. Oh, it's very real. Would you like to see the investment records? I can show you exactly where your company would be without my funding. I clicked through several screens, showing him spreadsheets and financial projections. Your company was losing money on every project until Crystalia stepped in. We provided the capital, the permits, the contractor relationships, and the city planning connections that made your recent success possible. Vincent collapsed into the chair, his arrogance finally cracking. But you never said anything. At family dinners, you just sat there. I sat there and listened to you lecture me about finding real work. I sat there while you told me I needed to contribute something meaningful to society. I sat there while you bragged about your business acumen and your mysterious investor who had such great vision. I leaned forward. Vincent, I was sitting there funding your entire lifestyle while you told me I was worthless. Isaac, who had been standing by the door in stunned silence, finally spoke up. Dad, Ruth has been supporting your business for over a year. Every success you've had lately, every project you've bragged about, it was all possible because of her money. Vincent looked between us, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror. The Crown Plaza project. Dead, I said simply. I withdrew all funding this morning. Your contractors received cancellation notices an hour ago. The city planning office has been informed that Crystalia Holdings is no longer backing the project, which means your expedited permits are void. Ruth, please. You can't do this. I have contracts, commitments. The groundbreaking is Monday. I stood up and walked around my desk to face him directly. Vincent, last night you called me worthless trash in front of your entire family. You declared that your son deserved better than me. You humiliated me publicly and expected me to just accept it. I paused, watching his face crumple as the full implications hit him. Well, your son does deserve better than a father who doesn't recognize that his daughter-in-law has been keeping his business afloat while he treats her like garbage. Vincent's phone started ringing incessantly. That's probably your other contractors, I said helpfully. Word travels fast in the construction industry when a major project gets canceled. You should answer that. They're going to want to know about their payments. Over the next 3 hours, Vincent's office became ground zero for a financial disaster that spread like wildfire through Portland's commercial development scene. His phone rang constantly, contractors demanding payment for materials already ordered, city officials questioning permit applications, potential tenants inquiring about lease agreements that could no longer be honored. Isaac sat slumped in a corner chair, watching his father's empire crumble in real time. I remained at my desk, calmly answering emails from other clients while Vincent paced frantically, taking increasingly desperate phone calls. How much? He said into his phone. No, that's impossible. We had a payment schedule. He hung up and immediately dialed another number. Patricia, it's Vincent Morrison. I need to know my legal options for forcing an investor to honor their commitments. I looked up from my laptop. Vincent, you might want to save yourself some legal fees. My contracts with Morrison Development include standard withdrawal clauses. Everything I did this morning is completely legal. He stopped pacing and stared at me with something approaching hatred. You planned this. You've been planning this for months. Actually, I plan to continue our business relationship indefinitely. Your projects were profitable, and I believed in their potential. I closed my laptop and gave him my full attention. Vincent, I only made the decision to withdraw my support at exactly 10:07 last night. What happened at 10:07? That's when you finished explaining to your entire family why I was worthless trash and your son deserved better than me. That's when I realized that continuing to support someone who held me in such contempt was bad business. Isaac finally spoke up from his corner. Dad, do you understand what you've done? Ruth wasn't just some random investor. She was family. She was supporting your dreams while you treated her like she was nothing. Vincent's phone rang again. This time, when he answered, his face went completely white. What do you mean, foreclosure proceedings? I have 60 days to cure the default." He listened for several minutes, then hung up slowly. "Your primary lender?" I asked. He nodded numbly. Morrison Development used the Crown Plaza project as collateral for loans on 3 other properties. Without that project, the bank is calling in all the loans immediately. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but it died quickly when I remembered the look of disgust on his face as he called me trash. "Vincent, your company's financial structure was built on the assumption that my investment would continue long-term. When you remove the foundation, the entire building collapses." "Ruth, please. I'll apologize to the family. I'll make it right." "You'll apologize because your business is failing, not because you actually respect me. That's not the same thing." I stood up and gathered my things. "Vincent, you spent months telling people that your anonymous investor was brilliant, visionary, and understood quality development. You praised this person's business instincts and financial acumen. You never once considered that the woman you were dismissing as worthless trash at family dinners might be that same person." I walked to the door, then turned back. "By the way, you should know that withdrawing from the Morrison Development projects frees up significant capital for other investments. I'm meeting with 3 new development companies next week. Portland's commercial real estate market is booming, and there are plenty of developers who understand the value of treating their investors with respect." Vincent's phone was ringing again as I left his office, Isaac close behind me. 2 weeks later, I sat in my favorite coffee shop downtown, reading the Portland Business Journal's front-page article about Morrison Development's spectacular collapse. The headline read, "Local developer files for bankruptcy after mystery investor withdraws support." The article detailed how Vincent's company had gone from Portland's rising star to complete financial ruin in just 14 days. Isaac slid into the seat across from me, looking exhausted but relieved. "The bankruptcy filing is official. Dad lost everything. The office building, the rental properties, even the house." "How is he handling it?" "Badly. He keeps insisting this is all some kind of misunderstanding, that you'll come back once you've made your point." Isaac shook his head. "He still doesn't really understand what happened. Yesterday he asked me if I could convince you to have coffee with him, so he could explain why the family needs you to reconsider." I nearly choked on my latte. He wants to explain why the family needs me? After calling me worthless trash? "Ruth, I think in his mind, you were never really the investor. You were just Isaac's wife who happened to own the company that was investing. He can't wrap his head around the fact that you personally made all those business decisions." I looked out the window at the construction site where the Crown Plaza project should have been breaking ground. Instead, it was just an empty lot with a development postponed sign. 3 other development companies had already contacted me about potential partnerships for similar projects. Vincent's failure had become my opportunity. "Isaac, your father called me worthless trash in front of 23 family members. Then, when his business started collapsing, he expected me to put my personal feelings aside and continue funding his dreams because the family needed me to do it. Does that sound like someone who respects me as a person, or someone who just wants access to my money?" Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "The family is starting to understand what really happened. Patricia called yesterday to apologize. She said she had no idea you were the investor Dad was always praising." I smiled grimly. Vincent's going to have plenty of time to think about respect now. The social fallout for Vincent proved even more devastating than the financial collapse. Word spread quickly through Portland's business community that Vincent Morrison had publicly insulted and humiliated his primary investor without knowing her identity. The story became a cautionary tale at industry networking events, a perfect example of why treating everyone with respect was not just morally right, but also good business sense. Several potential partners who had been considering future deals with Vincent quietly withdrew their interest. Nobody wanted to work with someone who had demonstrated such spectacular judgment failures. The fact that he had called his own daughter-in-law worthless trash while she was secretly funding his entire operation made him appear both cruel and incompetent. Vincent's attempts to rebuild were hampered by his reputation. Every meeting began with uncomfortable questions about the Crystalia holding situation. Potential investors wanted to know how he had failed to recognize his primary financial backer, and whether he could be trusted to maintain professional relationships going forward. 6 months after that disastrous family dinner, Isaac and I attended his cousin's wedding, one of the few family events where Vincent wasn't present. Patricia Morrison approached me during the reception, looking genuinely remorseful. "Ruth, I wanted you to know how sorry I am about that night. Vincent was completely wrong, and the family knows it now. We also know that you were incredibly generous to support his business for so long." I accepted her apology graciously, but the damage to family relationships was permanent. Vincent had revealed his true character that night, and his subsequent attempts to win me back were motivated by financial desperation rather than genuine respect. The trash he had dismissed so cruelly had proven to be worth more than his entire business empire. That lesson would follow him for the rest of his career. Vincent Morrison's life never recovered from the cascade of failures that followed his decision to publicly humiliate me. The bankruptcy destroyed not only his business, but his standing in Portland's development community, where he became known as the man who called his anonymous investor worthless trash, and lost everything as a result. His marriage to Patricia crumbled under the financial stress and social embarrassment, and his relationships with his children were permanently damaged when they learned he had been surviving on money from the daughter-in-law he had so cruelly attacked. Attempts to start new ventures failed repeatedly as potential partners and investors questioned his judgment and character, leaving him to work for other developers in junior positions, a humbling fall for someone who had once owned multiple properties and commanded respect throughout the city. His isolation deepened as former friends and business associates distanced themselves from the cautionary tale he had become. As I signed the contracts for my latest acquisition, a downtown office complex that would house 3 growing tech companies, I reflected on how Vincent's cruelty had ultimately freed me from supporting someone who confused my generosity with weakness. The revenge had been perfect, not because I had plotted it, but because I had simply stopped enabling someone who didn't value me, allowing natural consequences to reveal the true worth of both his character and his business acumen. Sometimes the most powerful response to being called trash is simply walking away and letting people discover what they've actually thrown away.